Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. After guiding my car into the most distant parking spot in the garage, I pressed the remote, hearing the familiar groan of the door as it descended, shutting out the last streaks of daylight. With a sigh, I reached for my phone and briefcase. A quick touch to the hood of Larry's car confirmed it was still warm. He hadn't been here long. Inside, a glass of chilled Chablis awaited me on the counter. I slipped off my heels, dropped my briefcase onto the kitchen table, and brought the glass to my lips, savoring the crisp, delicate flavor. Through the window, the view stretched wide and serene, a contrast to the tension winding in my chest. As I walked toward the living room, I called out, "Are you upstairs?" "Took your sweet time," came the response. "The bath's running. Did you notice the wine on the counter?" "Not only did I notice, I'm already a few sips in." "Tell me you brought the bottle up." "I did." "Are you ready?" I teased. "One question. Did you remember the lube?" "Please, do you think I'd forget something so crucial?" I shot back. Taking the stairs two at a time, I found Larry waiting, completely exposed. I placed my glass aside and began undoing the buttons of my blouse, aware of his gaze trailing over me. Once undressed, we sank into the familiar deception we had both chosen. When it was over, I stepped into the shower alone, letting the water rinse away the remnants of our betrayal. Wrapped in a robe, I wandered into the kitchen where Larry was already digging into the fresh sushi delivery. The flavors were exquisite, the wine paired perfectly. He exuded the ease of a man who knew how to take what he wanted. Tonight, that happened to be me. There was something intoxicating about power. Larry, now spent, turned his attention to work, and the evening settled into a quiet rhythm. Soft, classical music played in the background, its melody smoothing the edges of my thoughts. Eventually, we curled together, and sleep took me. Morning arrived without mercy. Larry took the guest bathroom while I freshened up in the master suite. We stepped out simultaneously, moving toward the garage. With the press of a button, the heavy door rattled open. My car was farther back. As I placed my briefcase in the passenger seat, Larry's voice cut through the morning air. "What the hell is this?" Glancing up, I saw it. A chaotic pile of furniture and boxes blocking the exit. My stomach clenched. "We have to be in the office before 9. "Missing that meeting is not an option," Larry snapped. "Where did all this come from?" I demanded, my pulse accelerating. Larry turned sharply. "How should I know?" I recoiled at the venom in his tone. My eyes swept over the heap, a dining set, a sofa, a mattress, and then my breath hitched. There, crushed beneath the weight of the mess, was my grandmother's kitchen table, the one William and I had cherished since our wedding. Ice crawled through my veins as realization struck. This was my furniture, my belongings. Then I saw it. My bedroom mirror, shattered beyond repair. William knew how much that mirror had meant to me. A sick wave rolled through my stomach, and I barely made it to the driveway before retching. "What's your problem?" Larry muttered, annoyed. "I just called a rideshare. 10 minutes out. If traffic's clear, we can still make it in time." My hands shook as I whispered, "Larry, this is my stuff. William knows." He groaned. "Perfect. We need to clear this before my wife gets home." I shot him a sharp glare. "And how do you suggest we do that? We're trapped here, and that meeting doesn't end until 3. Who's handling this mess?" Larry was already dialing, pacing near the road. Then suddenly, a harsh curse exploded from his lips. I barely dared to ask. Now what? Main roads blocked. Some idiot crashed on the bridge. Traffic's backed up for miles. Rideshare just canceled. Every alternate route adds at least 40 minutes. My phone vibrated. An email. My breath stilled. It was from William. And he hadn't just sent it to me. He had copied half our company, including the president we were meeting today. Subject: Flora and Larry regret to inform you. Flora and Larry regret to inform you that they were too busy dishonoring their marriages to make responsible professional decisions. Please find attached videos for clarity. Legal parties will be in touch regarding outstanding financial matters. Best, William Marino. The world tilted. My body lurched, my throat convulsing in dry heaves. "Now what the hell is your problem?" Larry barked. I barely found my voice. "Check your damn email." Silence. Then, through clenched teeth, "I'll kill that son of a—" My limbs went weak. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. William had played his hand flawlessly. He wasn't overseas. He had been here. He had orchestrated every detail. And those videos, just one would be enough to destroy our careers. The two things I had prized most, my husband and my job, obliterated by a reckless affair. My phone rang. My assistant. Forcing steadiness into my tone, I answered, "Good morning, Anne." Her response was pure ice. "Not so good, Flora. HR had security clear your office. Your badge won't work when you arrive. You'll be escorted out. I hope it was worth it." The call ended. Tears burned down my cheeks, but I knew they were only the first of many to come. Larry stormed toward me. "An Uber's on the way. We can still make it by 10. I lifted my gaze, my voice hollow. "There's no point. I've already been fired." His expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" "Anne just called. HR has already cleared out my office. Have you checked in with anyone?" His fingers flew over his phone. His body tensed. His authority, his certainty, gone. A defeated breath slipped from his lips before rage consumed him. "Get your crap off my property." I flinched. For the first time, I wondered if he'd actually hurt me. My hands fumbled for my phone. My brother, voicemail, friends, ignored. Then, finally, someone answered. My pastor. 15 excruciating minutes passed as I sat amid the ruins of my choices, waiting for the help that would come too late. Larry emerged again, his breath reeking of alcohol. "I told you to move this crap." My patience shattered. "I'm working on it. Back off." A text lit up my screen. My pastor had found help. A few men would arrive in 90 minutes. And so, I sat among the wreckage of my life, knowing this was just the beginning of the fallout. When Larry stumbled back an hour later, he was clearly drunk, his steps uneven, his speech a garbled mess, and worst of all, a gun in his hand. "When is this junk getting out of here?" he grumbled, his voice thick with liquor. "Someone's on their way to pick it up," I replied, keeping my tone as even as possible. Larry didn't seem convinced. He lifted the gun, aimed it at the ceiling, and fired twice. The shots rang out, sending shards of porcelain angels crashing down. "I want it gone now!" he roared. There was nowhere to run, no escape if he decided to turn the weapon on me, but just as quickly as he had arrived, he spun on his heel and staggered back inside. Minutes later, the wail of sirens shattered the tense silence. 2 sheriff's vehicles screeched to a stop, deputies spilling out with assault rifles at the ready. They positioned themselves behind the scattered boxes, issuing commands through bullhorns. Moments later, Larry emerged again, even more disoriented than before, his hands raised in surrender. The officers tackled him, cuffing him on the spot for discharging his weapon. Meanwhile, the church volunteers who were supposed to retrieve the boxes hesitated at the sight of the yellow crime scene tape. Despite my assurances, they turned and left. At least Larry was out of the picture. That was something. Exhausted, I slumped into my car to charge my phone. The battery was fine, but when I tried to make a call, all I saw was a glaring red no-service message. Earlier, my phone had worked just fine. Now, nothing. Damn it, William. How am I supposed to fix this if you keep pulling stunts like this? I muttered under my breath. The spectators who had gathered to watch Larry's arrest had begun to disperse, but I still needed to get a call through. I knocked on a nearby door, only for it to crack open just enough for someone to snap, "Go away, or we'll call the cops." I had to walk nearly a mile before I found someone willing to let me use their phone. The pastor answered on the second ring and promised to come get me. By the time I returned to Larry's driveway, 3 teenage boys had started rifling through my belongings, pulling clothes from my boxes and laughing among themselves. "Hey, get away from that!" I shouted, but they just smirked. "Why don't you try these on for us, lady?" one of them sneered, holding up a pair of my underwear. I felt utterly helpless. Even if I weren't exhausted and weak, there was no way I could take on 3 teenagers. They tossed my belongings onto the pavement, treating my life like a joke, while the setting sun stretched shadows across the mess they had made. All I could do was hope the pastor arrived before Larry's wife did. Hunger gnawed at me, and the dehydration from earlier had left me shaky. Was it illegal to be inside the crime scene tape? Would I be making things worse if I took one of Larry's beers? Probably. But I didn't care. I cracked one open, knowing it was a terrible idea. Then again, had I made a single good decision today? When Reverend Thomas pulled up and honked his horn, I wiped my tear-streaked face and gathered my things: purse, keys, phone, and briefcase. My heels dangled from my fingers, and I suddenly realized I should have grabbed a pair of sneakers from my boxes. There had to be at least one pair in there. His eyes flicked to the mess in the driveway. "Is that all your stuff, Flora?" "It's everything I own." William found out about the affair and threw me out. His expression remained neutral, but there was judgment in his voice. I see. I needed someone to scream at me, to tell me exactly how badly I had ruined everything. "I know I messed up," I admitted. "I don't need a lecture. I need help." "You called me from 2 different numbers," he said. "When I tried calling the first one back, it was disconnected. It stopped working right after we spoke. William must have cut it off." The Reverend let out a heavy sigh. "You've made a real mess of things." "What's your plan?" "I don't know. My things are still sitting in that driveway, but I'm not sure I can take them with the police tape up. Let me make a call and find out. Do you want to stop by your house and see what's left?" Tears burned in my eyes. "Please." The drive was silent. When we arrived, the house was dark. I slid my key into the lock. It still worked, but my stomach clenched as I stepped inside. The place had been emptied. Nothing remained but dust collecting in the corners. Reality slammed into me. My knees gave out. He's gone. It's over. And for what? "Flora, you need to eat." "Let me buy you dinner," the pastor offered, as if grounding me in something normal. "Fine, but just something quick. I have marriage counseling sessions tonight. You and William should sign up for one." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Sure." At the restaurant, my credit cards were declined. Of course, William had thought of that too. Luckily, I had enough cash to cover my meal. I checked my ATM card on a whim, also useless. That night, I borrowed an air mattress and some blankets from the pastor. I slept in what was left of my home, a hollow space filled only with echoes of the past. By morning, the Reverend returned, letting me use his phone to call my parents. Telling them the truth was painful. My father remained silent, letting my mother handle the conversation. After a long pause, she agreed they would come the next day. My father had a doctor's appointment he couldn't miss. Still, they helped me secure 2 rental vans. 2 young men from the church helped load what was left of my things. Some boxes had been looted. My jewelry was missing. Whether William had taken it or if it had disappeared in the chaos, I had no idea. The entire time, an enraged woman screamed at me, introducing herself as Larry's soon-to-be ex-wife. She made it very clear that I should be afraid. I believed her. Once the driveway was cleared, I backed my car out of Larry's garage. Life was simple when everything worked. When it didn't, it was unbearable. The young men followed me home. An hour later, I was alone again, surrounded by my possessions and my mistakes. My gas gauge read 280 miles left before empty. My first stop was the bank, where I learned our accounts were frozen. Without cash, I couldn't even open a new one. Chicken and egg I muttered. Next, I went to the phone store. If I could provide a valid credit card, they could restore my service. I knew I had one in my name alone, but I never carried it. After hours of digging through boxes, I finally found it. With my phone working again, I left William a message, knowing full well he probably wouldn't answer. But he did. "William?" "I'm sorry," I said, voice shaking. "Sorry? For what exactly?" His tone was ice. "For failing to be the wife I promised to be. We belong together. Not a chance. How many times have you risked exposing me to some other man's STDs? Larry was the only one. We got too close at work. It just happened." His silence cut deeper than any words. The damage was done. If you were so set on playing house with Larry, you might as well take full advantage of everything you nagged me into buying for you. "My condolences, William." "Where's your stuff?" I asked. "It's in storage. The house is all yours. Go ahead, make it a sanctuary for faithless women, a getaway for cheaters." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "William, please, when are you coming back?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Not sure I'll ever step foot in the U.S. again." "Jeff Jenkins said you'd be served tomorrow," he replied. "William, I don't want a divorce. You know you'll have to pay me spousal support now that I'm unemployed. Keep dreaming, sweetheart. You overestimated me. Remember that mortgage application I had you sign not too long ago? Once the loan got approved, I transferred every last dime into Bitcoin." "Oh, and my entire retirement fund? That's coming with me. The accounts are locked for now. You'll get access eventually, but don't hold your breath. You're welcome. I've quit my job and moved on. This is the last time I'll be calling from this number. Your turn now. Good luck tracking me down, unfaithful woman." "No. We can fix this, William," I pleaded. Silence. I tried again. "William?" Damn it. He was gone. I called back immediately, but a stranger's voice answered. "Who is this?" "Is William there?" I asked. "William? Oh, you mean the guy who just handed me this phone? Let me guess. You're the cheating woman he warned me about. He said you weren't much good, but at least you were easy. So, when are we meeting up, sweetheart?" This time, I was the one who ended the call. A minute later, the phone rang again. "William?" I answered. "No, cheater. Don't hang up on me. You still living at 1440 Jackson? Me and my boys are in the mood for some fun." I slammed the phone down, my heart hammering in my chest. Had William ever even gone to London? Not only had he abandoned his phone with some creep, but he'd also handed out our home address. I called the police, but they barely reacted. "Call us again if someone actually tries to break in," they said. I gave them William's number, but the officer only confirmed that it went straight to voicemail. Living off Dollar Tree groceries wasn't the healthiest option, but it was cheap. As I forced down another flavorless meal, a sedan rolled up outside. Panic shot through me, and I bolted upstairs, peering through the bedroom window. The car idled for 5 minutes before pulling away. My entire body shook. One unfortunate side effect of having my phone number reinstated was that losers like Larry could reach me again. That night, right at midnight, he called, drunk, slurring every other word. In his mind, I was the reason his wife had left him. I didn't dare argue, not when I still remembered the way he'd flashed that gun before. I let him ramble until he got tired and hung up. After crying myself empty for days, I felt nothing. The pain had drained me completely. Dad helped me move my belongings into storage. I was back home, though not in my old bedroom. Mom had repurposed it as her sewing room. Instead, I got the basement. It's been 2 years since that day. I have no idea where William is, but I hope he found whatever he was searching for. I made my share of mistakes, sure, but none of them justified what he did to me. The house was foreclosed on. Thankfully, after everything settled, I only owed a little. If I ever win the lottery, maybe I'll hunt him down, just to give him a piece of my mind. For now, I settle for screaming at our wedding photo. I've done it at least 1,000 times. It's the only thing that makes me feel a little less foolish for the mess I let myself fall into. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. I sat at the dining table, my eyes drifting between the wristwatch I wore and the neatly arranged papers before me. The speech they contained was already burned into my memory. I hadn't actually needed these notes for weeks. Yet, old habits clung tightly, and I couldn't bring myself to set them aside. Every word was refined and rehearsed, but even with my preparation, I felt the weight of the risk I was about to undertake. This wasn't a choice I made lightly. In truth, it felt less like a choice and more like an inevitability. My husband's unyielding stubbornness had forced me into a corner, and now there was no other path left to take. Did I want it to come to this? Absolutely not. But his unrelenting nature had left me no room to maneuver. I knew he would hate what I was about to do. Control was his lifeblood. Surrendering even a small measure of it would be anathema to him. Yet here I was, ready to strip that control away completely. As I leaned back in the chair, I drew in a steadying breath and braced myself for what was to come. Soon, he would return. He had no inkling of what awaited him. Perhaps you're picturing a classic confrontation, a dramatic confession of infidelity, maybe followed by an ultimatum. But you'd be wrong. I wasn't about to declare a separation, nor was I harboring some scandalous affair that demanded revenge. And no, I wasn't planning to humiliate him with the presence of another man. My husband, Freddie, was an extraordinary man in many respects, faithful, loving, and steadfast. What I had planned wasn't motivated by bitterness or betrayal. No, this was something far simpler and more direct. From the corner of my eye, I glanced toward Ashton, my accomplice, who loitered silently in the doorway to the bedroom. Standing at an imposing 6'4", his heavily tattooed physique was his most notable attribute. Intelligence wasn't the reason I'd hired him. His presence alone was enough to intimidate. A quick glance at my watch confirmed it was almost time. Right on cue, the faint jingle of keys sounded from the door. Ashton slipped into the shadows as I forced a smile to my lips. Freddie entered, shutting the door with practiced indifference before finally looking up and noticing me. His expression darkened instantly. "Peggy? What the hell are you doing here?" His tone was sharp, accusatory. Before he could say more, Ashton emerged from the shadows, pressing a cloth dampened with chloroform firmly over Freddie's nose and mouth. My stomach churned as I watched Freddie thrash and fight, his desperate movements a painful reminder that this wasn't some scripted scene from a film. Unlike the instant unconsciousness depicted in movies, it took long, agonizing minutes before his struggles began to weaken. In a final attempt to resist, he stomped on Ashton's shin. The blow was poorly aimed but strong enough to make Ashton flinch. Frustrated, Ashton abandoned the cloth and delivered a single devastating punch to Freddie's chin. At last, his body went slack. Together, Ashton and I carried Freddie's inert form to the bedroom, where we tied him securely to the bed. I handed Ashton the final payment, and without a word, he pocketed the money and disappeared into the night. Alone now, I perched on the edge of the bed, stroking Freddie's face with trembling fingers. That's when I noticed something was wrong. His skin had turned an alarming shade of blue, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Panic surged through me as I realized he had swallowed his tongue. Acting on instinct, I tilted his head back, clearing his airway and allowing him to breathe freely again. Relief flooded me as the color gradually returned to his cheeks. I sat there, heart pounding, as I waited for him to wake. When Freddie's eyes finally fluttered open, his reaction was immediate. He lunged forward, only to be yanked back by the restraints. His wild eyes darted around the room as he shouted for help. My heart sank. So much for the calm, measured conversation I had envisioned. With trembling hands, I reached for the gag I had prepared, knowing that any attempt at reasoning with him was now futile. Taking a deep breath, I secured the gag and prepared to explain. But something was off. Again. Freddie's body convulsed violently, his eyes rolling back as spasms overtook him. Frozen in horror, I didn't notice the door bursting open until it was too late. A woman stormed in, tackling me to the floor. She was taller, younger, and far more athletic than I was. Her fiery red hair framed piercing green eyes that blazed with fury. Before I could react, she pinned me to the ground with shocking ease. "Let me go! I need to talk to my husband," I cried. Her bitter laugh cut through the tension. "Husband? Try boyfriend. And if you try anything else, I'll break your arms. Understood?" The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Speechless, I nodded. She released me and turned her focus to Freddie, quickly checking his pulse and listening to his labored breathing. Her face drained of color as she pulled out her phone to call an ambulance. With swift efficiency, she cut the ropes binding Freddie and motioned for me to help move him to the floor. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice quaking. "I don't know," she snapped, pressing her ear to his chest again. "His heart's racing, irregularly. I can't perform CPR while he's on the bed." Her words shattered my composure, and I confessed everything in a rush. "We had to knock him out. The chloroform wasn't working." Her glare was ice cold. "Chloroform? Are you out of your mind? To win him back? That's insane." I shook my head desperately. "It wasn't about that. I know I've gone too far, and he'll never forgive me now." Before I could say more, 2 police officers entered the apartment. The red-haired woman quickly explained the situation, and one officer approached me with handcuffs. My pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears as they led me away. Regret and despair consumed me as the realization of what I had done settled in. Sitting in the cold, sterile holding cell, I couldn't escape the weight of my choices. I had risked everything in a desperate attempt to fix what was broken, and now I was left with nothing but remorse. Freddie's forgiveness seemed more distant than ever. All I could do was hope that, someday, he might hear the truth of why I'd done it. Fear gripped me like a vice. The thought of Freddie not making it was unbearable. If he didn't survive, I'd never get the chance to explain my actions or beg for his forgiveness. Time dragged endlessly until I was led into an interview room. 2 detectives sat across the table, their faces blank, and started a recording device. I didn't mind being recorded. That was the least of my concerns. But cooperation? That wasn't on the table. To their first 3 questions, I responded the same way each time. I declined to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me. I had watched enough crime shows to know the drill. They started discussing whether to get me a legal aid lawyer when a knock on the door interrupted them. Another officer stepped in. "Freddie's girlfriend wants to speak with her," he announced. The detectives exchanged reluctant glances but eventually left the room. A tall woman with vivid red hair entered and sat across from me. "I'm Wendy Dormer," she introduced herself. "And yes, Freddie's alive." "Is he okay?" I blurted out, unable to contain myself. "He'll make it," she replied, her tone sharp. "But thanks to your little chloroform stunt, he now has a heart condition, cardiac arrhythmia. The doctors say he'll recover as long as his heart rate stays stable. If it spikes, he'll lose consciousness. They plan to restart his heart soon, and there's a good chance he'll fully recover. If not, he'll need a pacemaker." Relief washed over me, but I couldn't stop myself from sizing her up. Wendy was beautiful in an almost artificial way, polished but lacking substance. Her bright eyes betrayed a certain hollowness. Still, I wondered why she was here, and she didn't leave me wondering for long. "Peggy," she said firmly, "this has to stop. Don't you get it? Freddie doesn't care about your reasons. He just wants to move on. He wants a divorce." But he has to listen to me, I protested. No, she said bluntly. He doesn't. There's no law that says he has to hear you out. From what he's told me, everything was fine until he caught you with someone else. As far as he's concerned, that was the end of your marriage. He owes you nothing. I don't want to fix things, I insisted, my voice desperate. I just want him to forgive me. After he left, I tried calling, but he wouldn't answer. He ignored my emails, sent my letters back unopened. Even a registered letter was refused. It's maddening. And ambushing him at his job? Wendy cut in. I know, I admitted, defeated. He stuck his fingers in his ears and called security. I even reached out to his mom, but she hung up on me. My parents won't help. They've practically disowned me. And now, even my kids won't speak to me. That's been the hardest blow of all. You refused to sign the divorce papers, didn't you? Wendy asked. Yes, I admitted. I told him I wouldn't sign until he met with me face to face. Instead, he froze everything. It's infuriating. If he'd just let me explain, we could all move forward. Wendy's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, she said, Freddie told the kids not to judge you too harshly. He said your mistakes were against him, not them. But they're adults now. They make their own choices. Wait, I said, startled. When did you see them? Were you in Sydney? No, she replied. They were here last week on their semester break. Her words hit me like a physical blow. My children had been in town and hadn't even tried to see me. Wendy gave me a moment to absorb the weight of that revelation before continuing. Peggy, if this will save Freddie's life and keep you from pulling more stunts, I'll listen to what you have to say. I'll even try to convince Freddie to hear you out. I studied her closely. Despite her polished exterior, there was an innocence about her, almost naivete. Realizing I had nothing left to lose, I decided to test her reaction with one of my justifications. Fine, I said. When Freddie and I got married, I was a virgin. I always wondered what I'd missed out on. Freddie suspected that, Wendy said calmly. But he told me waiting was your choice, not his. He said he gently suggested otherwise, but respected your decision. He even worried it might cause problems later, so blaming him isn't exactly fair. Her calm, measured response caught me off guard. But she wasn't done. And don't try to suggest he cheated first, or neglected you, she continued. From what the kids have told me, Freddie was devoted to you and them. He spent his free time with you, and they say he's one of the most honorable men they've ever known. Whatever you felt was missing, it wasn't because of him. Her words stung. My voice grew sharp, despite my efforts to remain composed. The problem was respect, I snapped. I'm a university graduate. I built a career after taking a decade off to raise our kids. Meanwhile, Freddie didn't even finish high school. But when he got promoted to foreman, everyone acted like he was a king. I work with accomplished professionals, and he spends his days with laborers. He eats what he wants and stays fit, while I've had to get a facelift and implants just to feel decent, and I still can't compete. My voice trembled as I continued. Even my parents seem to prefer him. When I get a promotion, they say it's expected. But when Freddie gets a bonus, a fraction of what I make, they treat him like a hero. I can't stand it. No matter how hard I try, it's never enough. Wendy's face remained neutral, but the pity in her eyes was unmistakable. It made my blood boil. She embodied everything I'd always hated. Effortless beauty, effortless charm. And now she was sitting here, offering me sympathy like I was some tragic figure. My hands balled into fists beneath the table. Every time I tried to prove I was better, I said, my voice rising, it blew up in my face. Even at the company Christmas party, after spending a fortune on my dress and hair, all anyone wanted to know was, where's Freddie? Do you know what it's like to be smarter, more successful, and more educated than your husband, only to have everyone adore him and dismiss you? Wendy shook her head slowly, her expression inscrutable, but I could see she was piecing together the cracks in my facade. And for the first time, I fully grasped just how much I had already lost. I had turned myself into the villain, petty, envious, and overly competitive, while Freddie became the sympathetic figure everyone rallied around. In time, I concluded there was only one way to prove I could outshine him. I needed to take a lover. If I could engage in an affair without Freddie discovering it, it would feel like a personal triumph. It would convince me, if no one else, that I was cleverer and more capable than him. If I could find a lover who was more thrilling than Freddie, someone who brought new excitement into my life, it would be a private victory, a silent humiliation he'd never even suspect. Not that this was particularly challenging. Freddie's trusting and oblivious nature meant I could have carried on an affair right under his nose. He'd never notice. Wendy's voice interrupted my thoughts. "How long did this go on?" she asked. 6 months, with 3 different men, I admitted reluctantly. Her eyebrows rose. 3? Freddie thought there was only one. Did it give you the satisfaction you were looking for? Not really, I confessed. Sure, it felt good to outsmart Freddie and keep it hidden, but the intimacy itself was awful. I'd been so inexperienced when we got married that I didn't realize Freddie was better than most men. These others didn't care about my needs. It was all rushed and unsatisfying. I continued. I only saw the first 2 men a handful of times each. The third, John, was a co-worker, and he was the only one who came close to Freddie in terms of skill. But I kept seeing him, not because I wanted to, but because stopping would feel like letting Freddie win. Wendy looked at me quizzically. Why did you see it as a competition? I felt like I had to keep searching until I found something better than what I had with Freddie, I explained. Only then could I feel like I'd achieved something he couldn't. I even tried coaching John to meet my needs, but it was a lost cause. Wendy's expression showed her confusion. You're telling me all of this, but it sounds like you've been chasing your own tail. Maybe you should have spent less energy fixating on Freddie and more on improving yourself. So, what happened next, Peggy? This doesn't match Freddie's version of events. Freddie believed I wanted to get caught, I replied. That's why he walked in on me and John that day. Did you want him to catch you? Wendy asked pointedly. Of course not. I knew he'd throw me out if he found out. I just didn't think he'd come home early that day. I had everything planned so John would leave before Freddie got back. Wendy shook her head. He didn't come home early, Peggy. You forgot it was daylight savings time. He left work at his normal hour. I let out a long sigh. Looking back, I can see that the entire competition was in my head. Freddie never tried to make me feel inferior. In fact, he adored me. But at the time, my insecurities felt so real that I became consumed by the need to prove something to myself. Wendy's tone softened. Even so, why did you go to such extremes to make him listen? I thought if I could explain my reasons, he'd understand, and we'd reconcile, I said. I found out where he was living and devised a plan to force him to hear me out. I bought chloroform online and got a friend to help me break into his apartment. But the chloroform didn't work as I'd expected, and Freddie fought back. My accomplice had to knock him unconscious. Wendy's brow furrowed. And then? We tied him up, but when he regained consciousness, he started having some sort of fit. I slapped him to bring him back to his senses, and that's when you showed up, I admitted. Wendy let out a heavy sigh. And now you want me to explain this twisted logic to Freddie? Absolutely not, Peggy. I won't do it. Please, I pleaded. You promised you'd tell him. Wendy's expression hardened. Not a chance. Freddie doesn't need to hear any of this. Maybe one day, when he's stronger, I'll share bits and pieces. But right now, he's better off without you. As I began to protest, Wendy glanced upward. At that moment, 2 detectives re-entered the room. One went to the tape recorder, stopped it, and removed the tapes. Well done, Sergeant Dormer, one of them said. That's a clear confession to breaking and entering, assault, conspiracy, and unlawful restraint. We'll wait on the medical report for Mr. Brown to determine if there are additional charges. Wendy looked at me one last time before walking out. When you get out, Peggy, do us all a favor and respect Freddie's wishes. Don't ever contact him again. I sat there in stunned silence as the weight of it all hit me. My career, my family, my reputation, all of it was gone. Freddie, meanwhile, was thriving. Women were lining up for him, and he'd become a beloved victim in everyone's eyes. And me? I was just a broken, bitter woman who'd proven nothing, outsmarted no one, and lost everything. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.